Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold, and we're having our weekly lecture. I want to thank our sponsor, Patrick Wheeler, and he's actually sponsored, or will sponsor, a few upcoming lectures. This is the first one. I'm going to mention him every lecture for a while. Unless we throw somebody else in there, but we'll see. Thanks to Patrick for sponsoring the lecture. Now, before we start, even though we've started, I want to talk about Simon Williams a little, also known as Ginger GM. A lot of people were either pretending or slightly upset that I'm doing great players of the past as though it's an insult because he's 43 and he's still playing chess. However, there was less complaining, although there was some, when I did Peter Lako a month or two ago, who's also 43. And the point is, Peter Lako was top 5, top 10 in the world for 10 years, and now he's not. And he plays like one tournament a year. So there's no super GM tournaments where you think, oh, Peter Lako's going to play and he might win. He's not going to play, and if he did, he wouldn't win. Which actually the World Cup's going on now and he's not playing, he's a commentator. So Peter Lako was a great player 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Now he doesn't really play anymore. Okay. Simon Williams is similar because Simon Williams has sort of the same career track as me. He was 25.50 FIDE at his peak, which is really good. And I was 25.63 at my peak. And now we're not. Now he's 24.67. So he's lost almost 100 points. I'm 2,400. I've lost 160 points. So I win. I lost more. His peak rating was in 2009, and this is 2023. So, I mean, it's not insulting. It's actually, I'm congratulating him on being a great player. And he's been one of the top 10 or 20 players in England for 20 years. Okay, now, Simon Williams isn't necessarily known for playing chess. He does play chess, but he does so much other stuff in chess that he's actually better known for that. And I'm going to go to the end of his Wikipedia article. These are the books he's written. That's a lot of books. And these are the DVDs he's made. And he owns the books and the DVDs. His company published them. He's also the publisher of most of the books. He has his own company, which he co-founded with a friend of his. And the DVDs are his also. Nobody said, hey, Simon Williams, here's $3,000, make a DVD. He made a DVD and he owns them, okay? And the chess publication company he has called Ginger GM, because he's known as Ginger GM. And typically, when you have a nickname in a sport, then you're pretty good, okay? You can't have a nickname and you're not good. Doesn't make any sense. Okay, so the Wikipedia article discusses his accomplishments, and for reasons that I don't agree with, but it's funny, I just don't agree with it. They spent a lot of time in his Wikipedia article talking about a game he played where he played a silly opening. Not because the game was good, not because his opponent was good, but because he played F3 on move 1 and King F2 on move 2. And somehow that's like half of his Wikipedia article. Okay, and he won the game, but all right. So you can read about that if you're interested. And they even talk about the game. They like, this happened and this happened. Okay, he became a grandmaster when he got his last norm at Hastings. I got an IM norm at Hastings in 1989 or 88, both. It's held over the new year. So. He got his final GM norm in 2005-06, and then 2 years later, 2007-08, he got his rating to 2,500, which made him a GM, and eventually he got to 2,550. He's also organized tournaments. Whoever wrote this needs a lesson in writing. It says he finished 7th at the British Championship. Later, he finished 2nd. Finishing 2nd is better. Lead with that. Okay, finished 7th in the British Championship. What? Who cares about that? Now tying for 2nd. Okay, that's good. He's also won the British Blitz Championship in 2005. And most of his accomplishments, if you read his Wikipedia, are in the 2000s, and this is 2023, ergo, great player of the past. But our sponsor could have said, I want to lecture on anything chess related, and I would have done it. So if you don't agree with it, too bad. Okay, and Simon knows I'm giving this lecture, and he thought it was funny, so. Okay, anyway, right now he does a lot of commentary. So if you watch chess.com or chess24, which is the same thing now, you might see Simon giving commentary on big tournaments. Okay, and so DVDs, books, he streams, he does commentary for big tournaments, he has his own publishing company, so he's very successful in chess. Okay, now let's get to the games. Now, in a coincidence, although it's not a coincidence, but it is, and I just saw an episode of Seinfeld where Elaine and a coworker were arguing about whether coincidences are coincidences, or if you can have small and large coincidences. And her coworker was like, you can't have small and large, it's just coincidence. And she says, no, you can have small coincidence. Okay, so it's a coincidence that every game I'm showing you is the same opening. And it's not a coincidence because that's Simon Williams' favorite opening. Now, typically, when I show you a grandmaster beating super grandmasters, usually they're white, okay? But not in this case. In this lecture, Simon Williams is black in every game, and he's the same opening. And I didn't have to do that, but those were my 3 favorite games of his, and those are 3 really strong players that most of you have heard of. So I didn't want to show you games where he beat Rufus and Doofus, because if he's playing in British tournaments that are Swiss's, half of his opponents are not very good. But if he's playing 2,700 FIDE, that's different, okay? So this is actually a current player, Wojtaszek, and he worked, I believe, with Anand in World Championship match preparation. Radosław Wojtaszek. I call him Wojtaszek, but I don't know the Polish pronunciation. Okay, and Simon Williams, I pronounced that correctly. Ginger GM. Simon's black in every game, so let's flip the board, which enrages a lot of people. People need to, see a therapist or something. Okay, Simon has black, so I'm showing you from Simon's point of view, and a lot of people are like, white should be on the bottom because I don't understand this. I can't help you. I can help you a little. Okay, now as you all know, except for one thing, Simon Williams' favorite openings are the French and the Dutch, and there's a player you've never heard of, and this will be watched by maybe 20,000 people on YouTube over the next 3 months. Of those 20,000 people, 2 or 3 of them will have heard of the player I'm talking about, and that player is David Whitehouse. He's a 2,300 player. He was 2,300 in the 70s, from Michigan. So I know him because I'm from Michigan. He sort of quit chess before I was playing. And he played the same repertoire as Simon Williams does now. I'm sure Simon's never heard of him. But when you play the French and the Dutch, typically, whether you face d4 or e4, doesn't matter which one, you play e6 on move 1. So if your opponent plays d4 and you play e6 and they play e4, you play a French. Most people don't play e4 here because they didn't play e4 on move 1. Now I do. I play d4 on move 1, and here I usually play e4, but I'm the exception. Okay, sometimes I don't. And if they play e4, you play e6. And the point is, if you play the Dutch here with f5, which is fine, you have to know this pawn sacrifice, you have to know bishop g5, you have to know some other weird lines. If you play e6, you don't have to know that. Then when they play here, you play f5, and you're avoiding the e4 gambit and some other stuff. So Simon Williams has actually played f5 on move 1, but typically he plays e6 first. Okay, they played a normal Dutch, and Simon plays the old variation. Okay, most people today will play a Stonewall, Or they'll play the Leningrad. If you play the Leningrad, you can't play e6 on move 1 because the Leningrad is f5, knight f6, g6. So Simon Williams is playing the third most popular line, the old variation, which he always plays. So, okay. So you're going to see this position a lot in this lecture. And again, this is against Wojtaszek, whose rating was over 2,700 FIDE. This game was played in 2011. Okay, and I learned this when I was a kid, that this was a way to play the Dutch, because the Stonewall and the Leningrad weren't as popular then. This was popular in the 70s and 80s. Okay, queen c2. And queen c2 is not the most common move, but it's fine. Plays a5, stopping white from playing b4 and gaining more space on the queen side. Knight c3, knight c6. So black has two ideas. If white plays d5, my knight can go to b4, attacking the queen and the d-pawn. And if you do nothing, I could play e5, because my knight on c6 defends e5. b3, e5, as I espoused. They traded on e5. Rook d1 attacks the queen. As in a lot of Dutches, black plays queen e8. That's common. Knight b5 attacks the c-pawn. Now, one thing that's good about Simon Williams is he's not a scaredy cat like me. He's the opposite of me. Okay, we're both grandmasters, and I'm a lot older than him, actually. He's not young, but I'm 10 years older than him. And I like safe, solid, steady advantage. Okay, I want to be better. I want to have no counterplay for my opponent. I want to outplay them in the end game. And Simon Williams is like, I don't want any of that. I want the game to be total madness. I want to attack my opponent, and I want to crush them. And if I have to sacrifice all my pieces, then I have to sacrifice all my pieces. So when Simon Williams loses, some of those games look iffy. Like, man, Simon Williams got crushed. But when Simon Williams wins, you're like, wow, he beat this 2,700 and that 2,700. And there's something you should do if you're at home now. Obviously, some people are watching live. But if you go to chessgames.com and you look at Simon Williams' best games, the first one I looked at, I think it was this one. The first comment insinuated that Simon Williams is a cheater. They said, this guy's no good, okay? And he beats super grandmasters all the time, and he listed them. He beat this super grandmaster, this super grandmaster, this super grandmaster, and his rating is low, and typically he plays badly, so he said suspicious. Okay, in chess, you can beat anybody and lose to anybody, especially if you play like Simon, which is every move he goes all in, like a poker player. Okay, I check. Every time I play chess, I check. I don't mean I check my opponent, I mean I check like in poker. I'm like, let's not have anything exciting here. So in this position, some people would play bishop to d8, which defends their c-pawn, and then their queen could help their e-pawn forward and so forth. Okay, Simon Williams don't care about his queen side. He didn't care about that. Okay, so he plays queen h5. He's like, you can take on c7, I don't care about that. And then he plays f4 and says, you can take my rook, I don't care about that. Okay, that's not how I play chess. But on the other hand, I've never beaten somebody whose FIDE rating was 2,700 at the time. I've beaten people who later became 2,700 and even 2,800, but not when they were that rating. Okay, so he takes the rook and he plays bishop c5. He plays like a developing move. Bishop's good on c5, and this bishop's probably good on h3, and this knight's probably good on g4. And your knight is over here, so I don't care about that. You could argue, if you want to, that black's only down the exchange because this knight is useless. You could also argue this rook is useless. So as far as attacking white, black has more pieces attacking than white has defending. Now obviously, the queens are ever traded, then black has to resign. But queens weren't traded. Okay, so he played a rook d5, sacking the exchange, but not really. Because if you take the exchange, now your pieces are all hanging. And also you're already down a rook, so he doesn't care about material. So he played knight b4, attacking the queen and the rook again. And he plays rook takes e5. He says, let's trade everything. I'm up a rook. Okay, so this is getting super complicated now. Now, if Simon Williams moves his queen and white moves his queen, black doesn't really have much of an attack anymore. So he trades queens. Now, black is down a rook, but both rooks are hanging. But on the other hand, you can't take this rook because rook takes c5. And then white's up a piece in an endgame, and black has nothing. So he has to take this rook. Now the rook on a1 is hanging, so he plays rook b1. Now in this position, I know it got complicated there. That's how Simon Williams likes it. Black is down 2 pawns. That's the material count right now. So probably when Wojtaszek played rook d5, rook e5, rook h5, he's like, I'm 2 pawns up in an endgame. What could be better? Unfortunately, black still has an attack. So he takes, threatening f2, you have to take back. Knight takes g3. Okay, now white's up a pawn, but e2 is hanging with check. Not easy to defend. Also, this knight is very silly on a8. He played rook b2, which is a mistake, attacking the knight on c2. Then when the knight moves away, the rook is defending the e2 pawn. A bad miscalculation on his part. Bishop f5, defends the knight, attacks this knight, and now we're threatening knight takes check, winning the bishop. So rook b2 is a blunder. Bishop f5 does everything. Defends the knight, attacks the knight on a8, threatens knight e2 check. And in this position, Wojtaszek has to resign. He can't lose this knight, and he can't lose this bishop. Also, his rook's trapped. So I got like bishop a3 coming. So white's just going to lose a piece here and lose the game. And you can see black's pieces are very, very active. That's how Ginger GM does it, and that's how he plays chess. So if I showed you his worst games, it wouldn't look very good. If I show you his best games, he's beaten 2700s. He puts a lot of pressure on them, and occasionally they fail. They can't handle the truth. Okay, and then the next game is against Ivan Sokolov, and I'm so old that I remember when Andrei Sokolov was by far the best Sokolov in the world. He even got to number 3 in the world. And he played for Russia, and now he plays for France, and he's semi-retired. This is Ivan Sokolov, who's used to play for, I think, Bosnia-Herzegovina, unless I'm making that up. And now he plays for the Netherlands. And I think he lives in Dubai now. I think he coaches players in the UAE, coaches their talented juniors. Okay, so this was played in 2006, probably around the time Ivan Sokolov was at his peak. He was, 2650, 2670, and he has a famous win over Kasparov. He just rolled Kasparov. He beat him out of the opening. Kasparov was just lost immediately. So Ivan Sokolov is pretty good. He's played in a lot of tournaments at Vikonsee because he's Dutch. I don't know if he's still Dutch, but he played for the Netherlands, and I think he still does. Okay, so once again, it's the same, but different. Simon Williams plays the Dutch, plays the same way. Okay, if white played queen c2, it would be the same game as the Wojtaszek game. Knight e4. I've actually had this position with white. I had it in 1982. Man, I got crushed. God damn. Okay, bishop d2. I think queen c2 is more common, but bishop d2 is okay. Knight c6. d5. Sokolov also likes to play very interesting chess. He doesn't like it boring, so we don't get a boring game here. Knight takes d2, knight takes d2, knight e5, the knight was attacked. And white played boring e3. Simon Williams attacks the pawn again. b4. Black has the 2 bishops, but some would say this bishop on c8 isn't very good. But Simon's used to that. He plays the Dutch. This bishop on c8 is not very good a lot of the time. Bishop f6, that bishop is good. Queen c2. Bishop d7, completing development. This looks like it's about equal. Rook d1, a5. So again, if I have black, I'm sort of worried about this, so I might play queen e7. But Simon Williams don't worry about stuff. He plays aggressive. a5, big threat to take on b4. If white takes, he's ruining his pawn structure. He'll have an isolated a pawn. C pawn is weak. So he plays b5. cd. cd, now the c file is open. So rook c8. If it's black to move, black can play rook takes c3, winning immediately. Then if queen takes c3, knight f3 check. So we'll do a Yasser. Play h3. Rook takes, queen takes, knight f3 check, and bishop takes queen. Now, moving your queen doesn't help that. I still play rook takes c3. So I don't want to be in this pin, but I can't move my queen out of the pin because he just takes my knight. So he played knight d to b1, which I think is the best move. You don't want to play knight d to b1, but you don't want to lose immediately. Okay, now your b pawn's not defended because your knight's pinned. So bishop takes b5. And if I go back, I want to indicate, in my opinion, b5 is a very bad move. And I'm guessing the engines would agree with me. And then I think black is basically winning here. Bishop takes b5, the knight's pinned. He played de6. He could play rook e1, but then he's down a pawn, and black has the two bishops. So Ivan Sokolov makes the game super complicated, sacrificing the exchange. Bishop takes f1, king takes f1. Simon Williams plays king h8. Typically in a lot of Dutches, this diagonal gets open because black's playing f5. And then we don't want our king on g8. So king h8 makes sense. Bishop takes b7. Queen b3, unpinning his knight, defending his bishop, and defending the e-pawn. So white has a pawn and a knight for a rook, and the pawn on e6 is pretty strong. So well, white has some compensation. a4, you can't take with the queen because rook takes bishop. So he takes with the knight. Queen e8, attack, threatening, rook takes bishop, queen takes rook, queen takes a4. That's why he played a4, and now his queen can go to the king's side, and he can start attacking with his queen and knight. And by the way, when I play queen h5, I'm threatening rook takes bishop because the queen's defending the rook. So white's so overloaded everywhere. Okay, he plays knight c3, defending everything. Simon Williams plays queen h5, threatening the h2 pawn. Bishop g2, he gets his bishop out of hock. If he defends the pawn, plays h4, king g1, then I play rook b8, and the truth hurts. So he gets his bishop to safety. Knight f3. White doesn't want to take the knight and give all the dark squares away, and white doesn't want black to play knight h2 check. So I'm glad I'm not white. He gives away all the white squares, getting rid of the knight. He tries to trade queens. In the ending, you could argue white's better because the pawn on e6 is so strong, the d6 pawn is weak, and white has a pawn or two for the exchange. And obviously with white's king so exposed, we don't want to trade queens. Okay. Trading queens makes no sense. Knight takes d5, threatens everything. Okay, now we're threatening h2 again. He takes the pawn, forking both rooks. Rook c8. So when Simon Williams won the exchange, he didn't say, now my technique is going to set in, and I'm going to win really slowly, and with an extra exchange, nobody can stop me. He just kept sacking material and playing for mate. That's what he does. Now the knight on c3 is incredibly attacked. It's attacked by most of black's pieces. He played king to g2, and he's not worried about losing his knight because the back rank is an issue. There's queen d8 and queen f8, depending on how black takes on c3. Although, could play queen e8, although there's e7. Let's see what he did. He played h6. I'm wondering if this is possible. Oh, I play queen takes c7. Well, that answered that question. That's the kind of blunder I make. And now black resigns. Black's down material, white's threatening several mates, and the bishop's hanging for good measure. Okay, so he played h6. Simon Williams likes to move his h-pawn. That's another thing you should know. Now we're threatening bishop takes knight. Knight b5, attacking the rook. Rook c2. Knight b6, attacking the rook. Now, if you're me, and you're not me, because I'm me, when somebody attacks your rook, you move it away. If you're Simon Williams, you say, I got two rooks. So I'm going to play f4, going for the attack, f3 check, queen h3 mate, ignoring his rook is attacked. So let's look at a variation. Here, f3, king h1. I could play queen h3 or rook f2. I'm going to play queen h3. And now if you play rook g1, I play rook c1 or rook f2. Rook g1 is cooler because I'm threatening queen g2 mate, but this should do the job. Everything should win. Okay, so you can't allow f3, never play f3, so he takes the pawn, and now that the e-pawn is gone, he plays queen e2, attacking f2, rook f1, queen e4 check. You can't play f3, it's illegal, so he moves his king. And again, white's moves have been forced, and it looks like finally Simon Williams is going to have to move his rook, except for one thing. Simon Williams thinks about chess like this. If my rook is attacked, let's sacrifice our other rook. He thinks differently than I do. That's why he beats 2,700 players. Now he's threatening queen g2 mate. King f2 is easily refuted. Easy calculation. Check, king g1 mate. That was easy. Okay, and you can't allow queen g2 mate, so the only thing to analyze is rook f2. White has, well, white could play queen d1, but that's silly. Rook f1. Rook to c2, threatening mate. Okay, rook f2 doesn't work because I can play queen check, attacking the rook, and if rook f1, queen e2, threatening mate and mate. The white knights aren't defending so well. Okay, so he has to play queen d5. That stops queen g2 mate. Queen e2, threatening queen h2 mate. And now I want to pause because this is funny. How does white stop mate? Let's see if the live audience, anybody can get it. It's a very funny move.
Queen h1.
Queen h1, put it in h. But Simon Williams is the master of the h file. Okay? And after queen h1, the king has nowhere to go, so we always retreat. See, if you beat a higher rated player, you want to sack all your pieces and mate them. And that's why one of my most famous games for me, and one of my favorite games, is the game I beat Mamedyarov. Mamedyarov is the best player I ever beat, and I sacked all my pieces and mated him. Okay, now that was a 15-minute game on the internet, but I'll count it anyway because I never beat anybody else like that. And these are all slow games and slow tournaments where he's sacrificing material and beating 2,700 players. Okay, now the last game is the only game that I had to show you. These other two games I could have picked some other games. I have to show you this game. This is the best. Okay, this is against Boris Gelfand, and this was in 2012. Now, as you all know, except for one thing, Boris Gelfand played for the World Championship in 2012, and he drew Vishy Anand 6-6, and they had a rapid playoff, which Anand won. So Gelfand was almost the world champion when he played Ginger GM in 2012. Okay, and it's the same opening. Gelfand always plays d4, and Ginger GM always plays the Dutch. Bishop e7. Okay, and we've seen knight c3 and queen c2 in this lecture. And Gelfand played b4. He wants to get queenside activity immediately. a5, as we've seen before from Simon. b5, knight e4, queen c2, bishop f6. We've seen Simon play a5, knight e4, bishop f6 before. Bishop b2, a4. So when Simon plays a4, he's saying, if you move your knight, I'm going to play a3 and kick your bishop off that diagonal. And he's also saying, my rook's defending the pawn. You might win my pawn later, but we'll think about that later. I'm not worried about that now. Okay, knight d2, attacking the knight on e4 a million times. d5. He doesn't want to take the knight because that's basically his best piece. So now it looks like a stone wall. Knight a3, blocking the a pawn, developing the knight. Now it really looks like a stone wall. Just black took a detour and played d6 and then d5, which is fine. We have a visitor.
Yeah, there's a late joiner.
There is.
Yeah.
Okay. We have somebody else joining the lecture. And obviously, you missed most of it, but you can see it on YouTube in a week or two. So, okay, so this game for the newcomer is Simon Williams is black against Boris Gelfand. It was a Dutch, and all the games we looked at were Dutches because he likes playing the Dutch. Okay, and he likes beating 2700s with black. And this was played in 2012. The same year Gelfand played for the World Championship and drew 6-6, lost the rapid playoff. Okay. Come on. Okay, rook b1. Rook's better on b1 than... Yes?
Sorry, is Simon Williams white or black?
He's black. Yeah, he's always black in a Dutch. Although he could have white in a Dutch. People don't play the Dutch against Simon Williams. And also, more importantly, Boris Gelfand is not playing the Dutch. Man. Talk about a guy who won't play the Dutch. Okay, Simon Williams will play the Dutch every chance he gets, even when he's white. Okay. All right, so bishop d7. This is a typical Dutch idea. Bishop goes to e8 and then either to h5 or g6. Then the knight can go to d7. Okay. Also, in this particular position, and in his game with Sokolov, the b5 pawn is attacked. Rook c1. So white's pieces are all pretty good. Bishop e8. Knight goes back to f3. It has a nice square to go to on e5. And Simon plays f4 because that's what Simon does. Now, I wouldn't play f4 if I was black because I'd be afraid they take it. And then I'm down a pawn, but he don't care about that. He wants to open up the king. He's going to get his bishop in there, his queen in there, his knight's already on e4. He's not worried about being down a doubled pawn. He wants to open the g file. Queen d1, Gelfand doesn't have much to do and decides not to take the pawn. He only gave him one chance. And then bishop g6. That's why Gelfand played queen d1, because this would have been lined up with the queen and rook, and that's why he played f5, not only to attack, but to open this diagonal. So basically, Simon Williams is outplaying Gelfand. bc, knight takes c6. Good thing he didn't move his knight already. Knight b5, bishop g5 threatening the rook, bishop a3 threatening black's rook. He saves his rook. They trade on g5. Now black is obviously attacking f2. Lots of guys on f2. Bishop takes e4, getting rid of the attack. He takes with the pawn because he wants to play the move e3. It looks more natural to take with the bishop, and that's probably what I would have done. But then white could play knight d6. So I don't know. This looks like, man, Simon Williams would play this move. I don't know if it's good. I guess after this I resign. Dang. Man, now the bishop defends f8. Man, so you can't get this other rook over here. Oh, I resign. Okay, so he played de, and he wants to play e3. And if it was my move and I played e3, the game's over. Your king side just falling apart. Notice Gelfand's piece is all on the queen side. So that's not good for defending the king. Queen e1. Now if you play e3, and I take this, my queen is defending. Although, I guess he'll play f4. Well, then rook takes f4. I don't know what he would do against e3. Maybe he played e3, I don't know. He played e3, okay, I don't know. I don't know what white's supposed to do here. We'll see what Gelfand had in mind. I guess f3, I guess. Man, terrible. No wonder he lost. Okay, f3, never play f3. Bishop takes rook, took the exchange. Rook f6. Whenever Simon Williams wins material, he continues to attack. He doesn't care about material. Okay, he got his bishop on g6 out of the way, so his rook and queen can come on the h file or the g file. King g2, rook h6, g4. Gelfand actually wouldn't mind an endgame. Queen h4, I trade queens, the rook is stupid on h4, knight d6 is coming, and these pawns are all really weak. The rook on h4 is out of the game. For reference, I refer you to the game Jan Timman, Valery Salov, Candidates Match 1988. In February of 88, but you don't need to know that. In St. John, New Brunswick. That was also a Dutch. They traded queens. Salov's rook was over here, and Timman just won on the queen side. It was the only game of the match that was decisive. They had 5 draws before that. So even though you were taught by somebody, some maniac, to trade queens when you're head material, not here. And Simon Williams doesn't trade queens. That's against his religion. Okay, so knight e7. Here comes the knight. Can't allow that. We can't let the knight come in. So he takes it, takes back. We stop knight d6. White can't play knight d6. He plays queen g3. Rook d8, stopping knight d6 again. Queen e5, that looks pretty good. Queen h4, threatening queen f2 checkmate with advantage. Queen g3, let's trade queens. And again, a lot of you guys trade queens when you're head material, but you can't do that here because your rooks are no good. All these pawns are really weak. So you can't trade queens, you have to attack the white king. So queen e7, queen e5, always repeat. Simon Williams plays for the win, plays rook g6, he doesn't repeat moves. c5, now he can play knight d6 again. Rook g5, the queen takes the pawn. h5. Simon Williams always playing for the attack. Doesn't matter what the material situation is. Knight d6, now white has a great knight. White's threatening rook takes b7. Good counterplay for white. hg, f4 blocking the file, so the king is safe. And we can't take on passant. See? It won't let me because it's illegal. Pawn started on f3. Can't take on passant. Okay, now black wants to play queen h4 again, or rook h3. Queen g3, stopping queen h4. If we play rook h3, queen takes g4. So he plays queen f6, threatening the d pawn. Queen takes g4. We can't take the d pawn because queen takes rook. Rook h6, threatening rook g6. f5, stopping rook g6. Takes, threatening rook g6. Knight takes. Now, if you play rook g6 here, I can't take and then fork because I'm in check. I'm in check. Also, the knight's pinned. That was a good joke. Yeah. Okay. So what he could do, Gelfand, is play knight e7 check first and then take the rook. Then black would play queen takes e2 check, and I would resign because it's too complicated. And I believe that's what happened. That is what happened. Knight e7 check. Okay, now, in this position, in a shock to your system, material is equal. And the question is, whose king is more exposed? Well, black has a pawn in front of his king, and white doesn't. And both sides have big threats. Rook takes b7, rook takes d4. Unfortunately, white's in check. So white doesn't have time for rook takes b7. Okay, now in this position, I can't imagine not playing rook takes d4 because white has no checks. The queen on e2 is stopping the 2 white checks. So this move looks good because I take a pawn. I can play queen e3 check or rook d2 check or rook d3 check. And I'm guessing rook takes d4 also wins, but it's a guess. I'm not 100% sure. But I don't see why it doesn't. But I think what Simon did was more accurate. Simon played rook d5, okay, because he wants his rook to have access to the h file, and the rook on d4 doesn't have access to the h file. And in this position, Gelfand resigned, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, the only move I would make with white, where I wouldn't resign, is rook takes b7. And the engine says rook b4 is the best move, and black is plus 20. So rook d4, what's that got to do with anything? Okay, so this is the move I would play if I didn't resign. And now you play queen f3 check. If you play king h2, I check you here, and if you go back, I mate you. If you play queen g3, it's mate in 1, checkmate. And if you play king h4, now I play rook d4. And there might be other wins, but this is incredibly winning because it's going to be mate, I guess next move, here mate. So if you can't play rook takes b7, and I'm threatening queen f3 check, this is probably a good time to resign. If you play rook g1 to defend and attack mate on g7, I still play queen here check. And if you block with the rook, I go here check. And you have to give your queen away for nothing. And then you lose your a-pawn, which doesn't matter, but just to let you know. Then you're going to be down several queens. You got to resign because black can promote all the pawns. So it's not good. So rook d5 was the last move of the game. And it was like the other games. Simon Williams didn't care if he was ahead in exchange or down a rook. He attacked. He played f4, queen h5, knight e4, bishop out, and he just kept attacking. And even though his opponents were 2,700, and in one case playing for the world championship, he crushed all of them. And if anybody beats Gelfand in a slow game in 2012, that's got to be one of the top games to show you. And Wojtaszek, the game that was played earlier in the lecture, he was also 2,700. So again, that guy's comment was pretty funny. How can a guy this weak beat super GMs all the time? Well, maybe he's not weak. He's beating super GMs all the time. That's why he's a great player of the past. Probably in the next 10 years, if Simon keeps playing chess and takes some time off of his streaming and making DVDs and writing books and doing Chessable content. Now he's doing Chessable content, so he's got a lot of stuff going on. He's probably not going to beat any more 2,700s because, he's not in his 30s anymore. But, he might. He plays like a maniac, and sometimes maniacs play good moves, and then you get crushed. And sometimes he wins games in 20 moves because his opponents can't handle the truth. I could have shown you more games where he beat 2,600 players, but we didn't have time. Sad. So that's Ginger GM. He's been one of the top 10 or 20 players in the UK for 20 years. He's won the British Blitz Championship. He's come in tied for second in the British Championship. And if you're on the internet, if you're on Twitter, or if you're on Chessable, or if you watch Twitch, or if you buy DVDs on the internet that are chess related, you'll see Simon Williams' name quite often. He's very prolific. And the quote unquote beef that we had, that wasn't really a beef because I'm a vegan. So that was just for show. So go Simon Williams. I hope you enjoyed the lecture on Simon Williams. I want to thank Patrick Wheeler again for sponsoring not just this lecture, but future lectures. And go Ginger GM. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.